All right, guys, so now I have taught you what you need to know to survive the semester. You have all the information that you're going to need to get a good grade in the class. If you just do the steps I gave you, you're going to get a B. So here we go. We are now going to start the content, really, of the course now. We're gonna start Plato. Plato's going to be what we're going to be looking at for the next block of weeks. So you have Plato to download. So Plato is an ancient Greek philosopher. He lived like 2,500 years ago, and he wrote a book called Phaedrus. The Phaedrus is a conversation between Plato and Socrates. I'm sorry, let's try that again. I fucked that up. Plato was a philosopher, lived 2,500 years ago, and he wrote a book called Phaedrus. It's called Phaedrus because the book is a conversation between this guy Phaedrus, who is just some young guy, and Socrates. And that's it. Nothing happens in the book. It's not enough. It looks, when you first see it, and you can download it from course content and take a look at it. When you first see it, it looks like a play, but it's not. It's called a dialogue. It looks like a play because you can see it right here if you look at it. You can see that you've got Socrates, and then he says something, and then you've got Phaedrus, and he says something, and then Socrates speaks, Phaedrus speaks, and Socrates, and this right, Socrates, Phaedrus, Socrates, Phaedrus, Socrates, Phaedrus, and they go back and forth like that. So it looks like a play. It wouldn't be a very good play if you put it on a stage. I think it would be boring as shit, because nothing happens in the play. At no point, nobody punches anybody. Nobody pulls a sword out. There are no other characters. No one joins them. Nothing happens in the story because it's not a story. It is a philosophy discussion. But the way the philosophy discussion is done is it is simply a conversation between these two guys that goes on for like 20,000 words, which is about the size of a Shakespeare play if you're thinking in terms of how. If you want to know how, I mean, I printed this out in a weird way so that it would, squish onto the page and be easy to print out. But if you printed it like a normal book, it'd be like 100 pages. And it's just a long conversation between these two guys. It's also not a normal conversation. If you were to record yourself having a conversation, you'd probably say 10 words, and your friend would say 10 words, and you'd say 10 words, and your friend would say 2 words, and you'd say 5 words, and your friend would say 12 words, right? And maybe if you got really upset about something, you'd say 20 or 30 or 40 words in a row, and then someone else would speak. In this thing, you will discover very quickly. Sometimes Socrates will talk for pages and pages and pages. Now, if somebody did that to you in real life, you would probably not be their friend anymore because they're not listening to you. They're just talking and talking and talking. But again, this is not real life. This is not a play. This is a work of philosophy. And the work of philosophy takes the form of a dialogue between two people, but it is not a realistic dialogue. It's speeches that characters are giving after a while, and they are not short. Some of them are very long. One speech in particular is it's like a 30-page, 20-page speech. It's huge. So that's a crucial thing to know. Now, 101 is supposed to focus on nonfiction, which can mean philosophy. It can mean all kinds of things. Ooh, hey, I believe my coffee has arrived, guys. I'm extremely excited about this. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. It's the same class. You want to say hi again, Maureen?
No.
Okay. Good. All right, Maureen. You already got Maureen content. You don't need additional Maureen content. All right. So the key thing to keep in mind. I'm so glad I got some coffee. This is great. The key thing to keep in mind here. This class is about nonfiction. Now, Socrates was a real person who lived. He was a philosopher in ancient Greece. Socrates is probably the most famous philosopher of all time. Plato was a student of Socrates, but Socrates taught in an unusual way. Socrates did not write anything down. He wandered around and he spoke to people, and that was how he did. He was a philosopher, and that's how he did philosophy. He just wandered around and spoke to people on the street, and he had these sort of philosophical conversations where he would walk and talk. You can see me doing that a little bit here. I like to teach and move, which I realize is a little bit weird because the camera angle is so funny, but because this make you dizzy after a while. But I also like to walk and talk like Socrates. I also don't really like writing things down, so I kind of agree with Socrates on that. But Socrates was a philosopher in ancient Greece who wandered around and talked to people, and that was he did philosophy by having conversations. He didn't write books; he had conversations. Plato was his student, and what Plato later on, after Socrates died, Plato he was executed by the city, by the way, because they thought his philosophy was causing too much trouble, and so they executed him because he was really like waking people up and making them ask questions and think about things that they didn't want him doing that. So they killed him. And Plato was his student. So Plato, unlike Socrates, was a writer. So Plato decided to write stuff down. But what he did was most of the things that Plato wrote are like this. It's like Socrates having a conversation with somebody. And whoever he has a conversation with, that's what the book is called. So he has a conversation with a guy named Crito, and that book is called The Crito. And he has a conversation with a guy named Ion, and that book is called The Ion. In this book, he has a conversation with a guy named Phaedrus, and so the book is called The Phaedrus. Because you can't call it after Socrates, because then all the books would be called Socrates, and that would get very confusing. So Plato wrote books in which his teacher is speaking to people. And the Phaedrus is, I think, Plato's best book. I love it. So, good. Did this happen in real life? Like, is this actually a conversation that Socrates had? I have no idea. It was so long ago that nobody knows. 2,500 years is a long time ago. And Socrates seems to be a real person. And the way we know that is multiple people, not just Plato, talk about Socrates. He was famous. And multiple historians and philosophers back in the day knew who he was and mentioned him. But is what you're reading here literally what Socrates said? Like, he actually say these things? Nobody really knows. For starters, you'll notice that Socrates talks to Phaedrus and no one else is there. So it's not like Plato is saying, I heard Socrates have this conversation with Phaedrus and wrote it all down. So it seems like Plato's got to be making some of this up at least, since at the bare minimum, how could he possibly know all of the content at a conversation that he was not present for? Socrates is a little bit like Jesus, who was also a teacher, who also didn't write things down, who also got executed because he was causing trouble. There's a lot of Jesus-Socrates similarities there. But it's the same kind of thing with Jesus or with Moses, that, were they real people? Well, we have books about them, but are those books totally accurate? It's hard to know if they're 100% true. Did people add stuff in there? Did people make stuff up? It's hard. It's so long ago. You don't know. The reason why it qualifies as a one-on-one book, though, is that it's not a short story. It's going to seem like a short story, but it's not. In a short story, in a novel, in a movie, in a poem, in a play, usually things are happening. There are events. There are no events in this story. It is simply a conversation about the nature of the universe and love, and writing and speech and all of these things. So it's I just want to be very clear on what it is. So I guess it's a dialogue, is what you would call it. It's not a poem, it's not a play, it's not a novel, it's a dialogue. Although the bigger thing that it is it is a work of philosophy by the most famous philosopher who ever lived. And it's a very, very famous kind of thing. And it's kind of great. It's also quite difficult. It's a very hard thing to read. I'm sure there are a lot of professors in the department that would prefer it if I did not teach this to you, because it is tough. But I think a lot of teachers at BMCC seem to think students are stupid. I don't think students are stupid, and I taught this last semester, and students seem to really like it. It worked. It's hard, but it's good to read something hard, I think. And so we're going to get started on this, and this is what class is going to look like. We're going to look at this thing, and we're going to think about it and talk about it, and we're going to, we're going to be making all the moves on that piece of paper. Remember the How to Write Your Essays paper that told you to quote things and put the quote in your own words and provide examples and then say how much you agree or disagree with it and then provide reasons and provide examples? That's what we're going to be doing with Plato for 10 weeks to practice those moves. I'll be showing you what they look like by doing them, and you will be practicing those moves in the comments. You'll be asking questions, but you'll also be quoting Plato, and you will be telling me what you think about him and how much you agree or disagree. And you'll be explaining Plato with examples, or explaining what you think with reasons and examples. So that's the class. So we're going to get started on it in the next video.